A man in his late 60s arrived first and left last every day, his colleagues admiring his dedication, but wondering why he wouldn't retire. Despite an excellent package and his body visibly struggling, he declined every offer. As he slumped into his desk, all the reasons everyone had suspected were revealed, and the room fell silent. David Mitchell had become a fixture at the county planning department. At 67, he had spent nearly 3 decades walking those same hallways. He arrived before sunrise, his sedan always the first vehicle in the empty parking lot. The security guard would nod at him through the dawn light, having grown accustomed to David's routine over the past decade. While other employees rushed out at 5 o'clock, David remained. Sometimes he stayed until 8, sometimes until 9, sometimes even later until the cleaning crew began to worry about him. What struck people most was his character. David possessed a gentleness that seemed rare in the world. When Sarah from accounting struggled with the new software system, David spent his entire lunch break walking her through it step by step. He never made her feel foolish for asking questions. He explained each function with patience, making notes for her to reference later. When the office coffee machine broke down and management said it would take weeks to replace, David brought his own from home the next morning. He set it up in the break room without mentioning it to anyone, with a small note that said anyone could use it. Even when his body betrayed him, David maintained that warm demeanor. His hands would shake sometimes while holding his pen, the tremor visible to anyone paying attention. Climbing the stairs to the second floor left him breathing heavily, gripping the railing for support. Yet he greeted every person with that same genuine smile. David had crossed the retirement threshold 3 years earlier. His supervisor, Margaret, had called him into her office that first year. She spoke kindly, suggesting perhaps it was time for David to enjoy life outside these walls. The company had prepared an excellent retirement package. His pension would be comfortable. Time to spend with family. David had listened politely, thanked Margaret for her concern, and declined. He wanted to keep working, he told her. Margaret tried again 6 months later, then again the following year. Each time, David gave the same answer. Each time, he changed the subject before Margaret could press further. Theories spread through the office. Maybe work was all he knew. Maybe he feared the emptiness that retirement would bring. Others thought he was stubborn, but no one dared ask him directly. David kept his private life private. Then came that Tuesday afternoon in October. David had been at his desk for 9 hours straight. He had skipped lunch again, something he did more often lately. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched beside a stack of permits he was reviewing. Around 3 o'clock, a colleague heard a strange sound. A thud, a chair rolling. When she looked over the partition, David was slumped forward, his face against the desk, one arm hanging limp at his side. The office erupted into chaos. Someone called for help. Others rushed to his side, calling his name, checking for a pulse. Paramedics arrived within minutes, loading him onto a stretcher while his colleagues watched in horror from the doorway. For 2 weeks, David's desk sat empty. The office felt wrong without him. People spoke in hushed tones about what might have happened, whether he would recover, whether they would ever see him again. Margaret visited him in the hospital, but she returned with no details, only saying he was stable and resting. The uncertainty was difficult for everyone. David had become part of the foundation of their workplace, and his absence left a void that no one quite knew how to fill. When David finally returned, everything had changed. He looked smaller somehow, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. His skin had a grayish tint that spoke of suffering. The tremor in his hands had worsened, but he was there, sitting at his desk, attempting to work as if nothing had happened. Margaret decided she could no longer stay silent. She closed her office door and sat across from David, her voice gentle but firm. She needed to understand. Why was he doing this to himself? What was so important that he would sacrifice his health, maybe even his life, to keep working? David sat quietly for a long time. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Margaret waited, knowing she had finally asked the question that mattered. When David finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Everything he earned, he explained slowly, had never been about him. The paychecks that arrived every 2 weeks, the overtime he accumulated, the extra shifts he volunteered for when others wanted time off. None of it had ever been for vacations or hobbies or comfortable retirement. Every single dollar had a destination, and it wasn't his bank account. The money went to Rebecca, his wife of 43 years. 4 years ago, she had been diagnosed with cancer, the aggressive kind that required constant treatment, chemotherapy sessions that drained their savings, medications that insurance only partially covered. And then there were the experimental treatments, the ones that offered a real chance but cost more than they had ever imagined. David worked those endless hours because every extra shift meant another treatment. Every overtime check meant another month of fighting. If he retired, even with his pension, the numbers wouldn't work. The treatments would stop. Rebecca wouldn't survive. So David kept working. Margaret sat frozen, her hand covering her mouth. When word spread through the office, employees who had whispered about stubbornness now stood in silence. The office would never see David the same way again. Every day he showed up was another day he chose love over comfort, sacrifice over rest. And when people looked at him now, they saw something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. And you. If someone you loved needed you to keep fighting when your body was ready to give up, how far would you go?